Hi and welcome back to my channel, or hi, welcome if you're new here. My name is Carly and I talk about honest, no frills motherhood. Today I wanted to share about my birth story and a little bit about what it's like to have a C-section, as well as some things that helped me get through my healing process. So I had an uncomplicated pregnancy with Leo in general. He was always measuring on the big side. I remember at my 35-week ultrasound, they estimated that he already weighed over 7 pounds. So I knew I was going to be giving birth to a big baby. I also knew that there was a chance that he might be late. My older sibling and I were both late. So I thought that maybe my son would take after me and my sibling, and he did. By the time I hit my due date, I was super over being pregnant. I was huge. It was the middle of August. I was super uncomfortable. And so I went ahead and opted for an induction. My induction started when I was 40 weeks and 4 days, and I gave birth to Leo early in the morning of 40 weeks and 6 days. So I went almost a week over with him, and his birth was an unplanned C-section. So about 25% of inductions lead to unplanned cesarean, so I knew the risk going into it, but I honestly didn't think that I would be one of the ones to end up with the cesarean. So the short version of what happened is they gave me Pitocin to start my contractions. Pitocin is the synthetic version of oxytocin, which is a hormone that makes you go into labor. So I was on Pitocin all day. I labored for about 9 hours on Pitocin with no epidural, and then I received the epidural, which that was an amazing choice. Highly recommend the epidural. But right when I got the epidural is when things kind of started to go a little bit sideways. So I had gotten dilated up to about a 6-7 at the time, 6 or 7 centimeters. And Leo started having a hard time tolerating the Pitocin. So in order to keep my contractions going, they're gradually upping the amount of Pitocin that they're giving me. And I hit a certain point where Leo's heart rate started to plummet. So the Pitocin went up too high and his heart rate dropped. And this kind of happened a couple of times. And there was even one time when Leo's heart rate got low enough that they actually took me to the operating room to monitor his heart rate there in case of a need of an emergency C-section. And that was a little bit scary. Luckily, I didn't need the emergency C-section there. So I was trying a whole bunch of things to get him to descend, to get him to take the Pitocin a little bit better, to try different positions, and just nothing worked. So they ended up having to stop the Pitocin to let Leo calm down a little bit, and then when they started it, the cycle would start back up again. So unfortunately, I was never able to progress past about 7 centimeters. And this lasted all night on August 18th into the early morning of August 19th, and about halfway through the night, like 3 a.m., they were kind of like, hey, the writing's on the wall, you're gonna need a C-section. And thank goodness the pandemic was at a point where I was able to have my mother with me, and my mom, her first birth was also a cesarean. And so she was such a great advocate for me, helping me figure out what questions to ask, making sure that I felt comfortable with everything that was going on. So I was so grateful to have my mom with me. And I think Alec was too, because she was able to support him. They were able to kind of sub each other out, give each other breaks while they were both supporting me. So I ended up having an unplanned cesarean, and Leo was born via C-section on August 19th, 2020 at 5:56 a.m. So here are a couple of things that I didn't know about what it's like to have a C-section and about the recovery process. First is what it was like to be in the operating room. Honestly, that was a really intense experience. I had already received the epidural, like I said. So instead of having to give me new anesthesia, they just cranked my epidural up really high to make sure that I was numb. I think this is like a fairly common response to the epidural, but I got the shakes really, really bad. And they keep the operating room really cold. So they ended up giving me like these heated blankets to stay warm. I was like shaking on the operating table. Yes, that was a big part of it. Alec was able to come in at the very last minute, but up until then, it was just me laying on the table with a bunch of people that I didn't know. I knew the doctor, my nurse was there, but other than that, it was like a bunch of strangers. Everybody tried to make me feel comfortable introducing themselves to me, but it was just an intense experience. Another experience that I had there that I wish I would have known about was that they didn't give me Leo right away. They actually cleaned him off, cut the cord, weighed him. Alec got to see him, and I think it took like 8 minutes or something from them pulling him out of me to me actually getting to hold him. And I think had I known that that was going to be the case, I might have tried to advocate for him being put on my chest right away, still covered in blood and afterbirth and whatever it is that he had on him, because I really wanted to have that initial skin-to-skin experience with him, and I was really honestly kind of bummed to miss it. We didn't find out if Leo was a boy or a girl before he was born, and so they just pulled him out. I heard him cry. Alec went behind the curtain, and I had to be like, is it a boy or a girl? I wish I would have been able to see for myself and find out that way. So that was kind of a disappointment. We were able to more than make up for it later. We started breastfeeding within his first hour, so all was well, but I just wish I would have known that they were going to keep him away from me for those couple of minutes to ask ask if maybe I could have him put on my chest a little bit sooner. And I think if I do have another C-section, that's going to be something that I ask for, because I do feel kind of bummed that I missed out on that. And then a huge one was the recovery. So obviously a C-section is a major abdominal surgery. They cut a scar like this long across the very lowest part of my belly, and that's how they got Leo out. I had a huge wound and I had just given birth, and now I had to take Leo home and figure out how to take care of him alongside Alec. And we ended up staying in the hospital an extra day, which is I think that's pretty typical for women who have C-sections. And they got me up and walking around really quickly, which I was really, really, really grateful for, because I felt like I was able to start to get some of that feeling back, just get moving around. It was pretty easy for me to push myself a little bit too hard because I was feeling good. I was on pain medication, but if I did that, then the bleeding would increase, because even after a C-section, you do end up having a good amount of bleeding. I just needed to figure out how to take it more easy while also not allowing myself to stay bedridden. So those first couple of days are really hard. It hurt to laugh. It hurt to cough. It hurt to pick anything up. I wasn't allowed to drive. I couldn't hold Leo in his car seat. Thank goodness Alec had a 2-week paternity leave and was able to really just help me out with stuff so I could just be available to breastfeed Leo and to rest, but I just really needed rest. It took me a lot longer than I realized it would to heal. However, I want to say that I did have a very positive healing experience. I think because Leo never really descended into the birth canal, I didn't really have any vaginal or perineal soreness after giving birth, because I just never had the opportunity to get all the way dilated and start pushing. So I do want to just point that out, because there are some women who push for a couple of hours before they realize that they need a C-section, and their recovery experiences might be a lot different than mine. And one more thing that I really want to make sure that I say, because part of me felt like maybe I failed because I wasn't able to have a vaginal delivery, because my body wouldn't go past 7, because Leo's heart rate was crashing because of something that I chose to put in my body. I just felt a lot of weird guilt around all of this. It took me reading something on Instagram, I think, that said C-section birth is birth, to recognize that just because I didn't physically push a baby out of my body does not mean that I did not give birth to him. And feeling like you failed because you had a C-section is not something that I want anybody else to have to experience. So in case you need to hear it from somebody, you can hear it from me. C-section birth is birth. So I don't feel guilt anymore about having a C-section. It was what Leo needed, and he was born at 9 pounds 3 ounces, and because he was a week overdue that big and not descended into the birth canal, I have a feeling that even if I hadn't had an induction, I may have ended up in the same position anyway, just a week later. So overall, it wasn't the worst thing in the world that I chose to have an induction, even though it did lead to my C-section, because I think that might have happened anyway. And I don't feel guilt about that anymore, because Leo is here, we're both healthy, and thank goodness I was able to give birth in a hospital that was responding to Leo's cues and Leo's needs and making it a safe experience for the both of us. So if you are going to have a C-section, here are some of my thoughts and tips. First, the hospital might give this to you because they gave this to me, but if they don't, absolutely get yourself an abdominal binder. This was key for me to just hold my abdomen in as my uterus was contracting back down to size, and as my scar was healing, it helped keep my posture really straight up and down, so I wasn't putting pressure on my scar by sitting weird, especially in those early days of breastfeeding. It feels like you're always slouching just to try to get your boob in the baby's mouth, and the abdominal binder kind of helped keep everything nice and tight and locked in. So if your hospital doesn't provide one for you, I definitely recommend getting one. It also helped keep me more mobile. So if I had my binder on, I was able to walk, I was able to move around, I was able to do a few things. So get an abdominal binder. Another thing that really helped a lot for me was having help. So like I said, Alec had a 2-week paternity leave, which was really helpful because I was not actually allowed to drive for 2 weeks after I had my cesarean. And so Alec had to take me everywhere that we needed to go. So that was really helpful to have him home. My parents were in town for a little bit after I had Leo, and then his parents came into town the next week, and we belonged to an awesome church that set up a meal train for us. So we had hot meals delivered to us almost every night for 3 weeks after he was born, which is amazing because I couldn't cook. I couldn't really do anything. not even just because of the C-section, but also just because of the pressures of early motherhood. So having help is not just a C-section mom thing. It's a thing for any postpartum mom, is to have some help. And I know that that's easier said than done, especially in the pandemic. And I would say that even though we are in a pandemic, that it is absolutely worth whatever hurdles need to be jumped through to make that happen, because we aren't meant to do this on our own. We can't do this on our own. It's a full-time job trying to learn how to breastfeed. It's a full-time job trying to recover from a C-section. It's a full-time job learning how to be a parent with a baby who doesn't sleep longer than 3 hours. If you are able to get help, get help. Stay mobile, stay on your feet. Try not to just stay bedridden. Even if you have to stay in bed or on the couch for most of the time, just getting up and taking a walk to the bathroom, taking a walk to the sink to fill up a cup of water, things like that. That was huge. Another thing that was huge was staying on top of my medication. I was just on like fat pills of ibuprofen and acetaminophen, but they also said that they would prescribe me narcotics if I was in more pain. Thankfully, I was able to get by with just the Tylenol and Motrin. I really needed to stay on top of it. And the times when I was in more pain was when I wasn't taking my medicine around the clock like I should. And the times that I felt a lot better and able to move around a little bit were the times that I was staying on top of my medicine. However, just because being mobile and staying on top of your medication makes you feel better, you still do need to take it easy, because you just went through something huge. And like I said earlier, the too much moving around made my bleeding start back up pretty bad. So just taking it as easy as possible while also making sure to not stop moving completely. Alec and I are hoping to have a large family, so ideally my next baby I'll be able to have a VBAC. But even if I don't, having a C-section doesn't feel like such a scary unknown anymore. I know for so many first-time moms it feels like the end of the world if you find out you have to have a C-section for whatever reason. And I'm just glad that I've learned that it's not, that my body has healed from it once, that I could do it again if I needed to. I don't know how many C-sections a body can have, so that's one of the reasons why I'd like to have a VBAC. But regardless, I know that I can give birth via C-section and have everything go really well. I know how to take care of myself after this. And if you are having a C-section for any reason, whether you've chosen to have one, whether you're forced to have one, whether it's an emergency or an unplanned situation, just know that you are being an awesome mother by getting your baby out and into the world. And that having a C-section is not the end of the world. You're gonna heal, you're gonna be fine, you're going to be a great mother. So yeah, those are my thoughts about C-sections. I know that there are definitely people who talk about C-sections on YouTube, but a lot of the moms that I follow did have vaginal births. So I really wanted to share about my experience with the C-section, just in case somebody else needs to hear this. Thank you guys so much for following along with my channel. I've really just appreciated all of the support. If you're not already subscribed and you're interested in more honest, no frills motherhood content, please hit that subscribe button. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments if you're a C-section mom or if you had a vaginal birth and what some of your postpartum tips are. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.